when you know it's a great deal, you're never going to be wondering what's going to happen. For lead generation, you can get your lead lists from CoStar, CREsync, Reonomy, PropStream. All of those software provide commercial lead lists. But that's what I use.
So you mentioned you were using Reonomy, but you're trying to currently working out a deal with CREsync?
Correct, yeah. So CREsync is probably the cheapest of all of them, to be honest with you. None of them have such great data that I'm telling people that this is the best. They're all about the same. So what you experience with CoStar is what you'll experience with any software. They're not always going to be accurate. The only difference with CREsync and Reonomy is that there's more phone numbers for you to call. So CoStar typically gives you one, where CREsync and Reonomy give you multiple.
So, all right, I'll try CREsync first, I guess.
Yep. So we use all of them. So that's lead gen. For underwriting, the big thing that I want to kind of get across is think about it like this. Most deals in residential, like the game is played when you speak to a seller and then you list their property for sale, right? You get them to list it, you put it on the market, and you hope and pray someone else has a buyer for you, right? I mean, that's how that's how that game is technically played. In commercial, that is one option, but it's not always the most profitable option, because what a lot of people do, one is that they don't truly understand the true intricate value of the piece of real estate. So they do the same thing in residential. So they go to the seller, they get them to sign a listing agreement at X price, even though sometimes it's absolutely ridiculous. I was just on the phone with a woman. One of my agents was on the phone with a woman who I was kind of working him through with the conversation. Property is about 35,000 square feet. She wants $8 million. This property is only bringing in about 440 grand a year. Net operating income, so after all expenses, it brings in around 300 grand a year. The point is she wants 8 million, and that cap rate, okay, through basically the return on investment, is awful. I mean, I told her that it's probably worth somewhere between 4 and 5 million, right, based on the current income today. However, if she's willing to hold paper, seller financing, we might be able to get her more money. So we're going to make her an offer at both rates. I made her an offer of 5 million and an offer for seller financing at 6. I'll break down exactly what that means in a minute. But a lot of people would just go, oh, you want to sell your property for $8 million? List the property. I'll put it on the market, blah, 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 right? What happens is that residential, you could take a listing for, let's say 800 grand, but it's only worth 6. And maybe eventually you finally get down to 650. She ends up, they end up taking something for 600 grand later down the road. With commercial, the property just doesn't sell, right? So it is just like an absolute complete waste of your time, because everyone's also going to think you're really stupid for listing it for that value, right? Because it's not worth it, right? If you go on LoopNet, you're going to see a bunch of properties that are listed for months on months and months and sometimes years because they're just completely overpriced. So basically, LoopNet is just a bunch of overpriced listings of brokers who really either they don't know better or they don't care to know better and they just list it anyways. The reason why we are able to sell as much real estate as we do is because what we do is a few things. One, we truly know the intricate value of the asset. That's not only just from my own underwriting, which is one part of it, but two, is that we pitch these deals to investors very quickly. So we get a lead, we immediately go to our pocket investors, our VIP investors, and we bounce the idea of this property off of them as fast as we possibly can. So because we want to get a quick feedback loop, because we basically just want to reconfirm my evaluations on every asset. So what happens is that we generate a lead. This is a process, right? We generate a lead. I make an offer on the property based on my evaluation to gut check the seller. So this woman said, hey, make me an offer on this property as an example. This is a lead we got. I made her an offer originally at $4 million. Now she finally came back to us and she said she wanted $8 million. Now, again, the reason I like to gut check people is a few reasons. One, test motivation. Number two, if she agreed to $4 million, I'm buying this deal today. I mean, it would be an unbelievably good deal. I can, probably make $1 million flipping the deal. That's number two, right? And number three, my intention is to also get a full-blown understanding of okay, have they received any offers before? I'm trying to get a real gauge of where their headspace at, because not only is it about motivation, are they ready to sell today, or they don't really care about selling, but also I want to hear back from them oh no, I've been offered X before, or I've declined X before, because I want to that's all feedback, right? It's oh, people believe that it's actually worth here. Okay, cool. So I'm trying to accomplish a few things at the same time when I get that lead. So anytime you generate a lead, I highly recommend the same thing. You'll learn my process. You'll learn exactly how to evaluate these properties, because what also will happen now is the following. She got back to us now. She goes, I want $8 million, but I would probably take 7 if the terms were right. So I offered her, now I came up to $5 million and a $6 million offer with seller financing, because obviously debt right now is incredibly expensive. But now what's happening at the same time, before we even hear a counter from her, I'm going to go to my buyer list, my VIP buyers, and I'm going to confirm with them and see where their heads are at. So I'm going to bring them this deal. I'm going to say the seller wants $8.5 million, right? You got to make sure I want $500,000 for myself. myself, 4, 5, 6%. And I'm going to get a feedback loop from those buyers. So those buyers now come back to me and say, listen, I'll offer 6.5 million, 7 million, 6.75 million, 4.5 million, 5 million, whatever they're going to say to me. And I want to get 2 or 3 legitimate offers so that by the time when she comes back to me saying, hey, I won't take 5 million, but I'll take 6.5, or I won't take your 6 million with seller financing, I want 7 million or 6.5 million, whatever it is, I already have some backup offers ready to go so we can try to lock up deals quickly.
So how do you keep it that, I did one assignment is it an assignment? Consider an assignment?
Every deal is different. Most of the time it ranges either between a broker deal, okay, or a wholesale deal, which is actually a double closing in commercial. I don't just assign them just because in commercial, the assignment fees are gigantic, right? And the last thing you want to do is have a buyer realize you're making $500,000 on it. So like when your assignment fee is $25K, it's sort of reasonable, right?
Right.
But the way I kind of break it down is that depending on the size of the spread is what dictates whether you should wholesale it or just off-market broker it, right?
Right.
Because
100%.
look, if it's 6, 7, even 8%, you should just broker it, right? Take a broker fee, and it's okay if you put 6 or 7 or 8% on there. If it's 20%, you won't just broker it, right? And that's when I would wholesale it. So like we have had deals where we're going to estimate on average that we're going to make somewhere between 15 and 25%, right? Based on what the seller's willing to accept and what a buyer's willing to pay. I will always wholesale that. So I'll lock it into a contract myself, put down a deposit myself, and I'll flip the deal.
Going into contract, putting a deposit down, and then if you're wholesaling it, you put down the deposit, and then how do you flip it?
Okay, so it's basically an A to B contract is me, right? I'm the buyer. Right. So A is the seller to B buyer. And then there will be a separate contract, right? Then it's a double close, right? So I'm closing here, and then I'm going to close from B to C. So then I will find my own buyer paying me at X price, putting down a larger deposit, having a shorter due diligence time frame than me, and having a shorter closing time frame than me because they're going to technically close first.
Right. Okay. Okay. So you close at 9 a.m., they close at 12 p.m. Like basically line it up. Okay,
exactly.
Got it.
Yep.
All right. So neither side is aware of what's going on. And that's fine. I mean, that's part of wholesaling.
Depending on the buyer, I'll tell them. And I'll just say, listen, it's a wholesale deal. We have it in contract, right? Like the seller believes I'm the buyer, so I can't broker this deal, right? They don't want any real estate agents involved, so I'm going to be wholesaling this. So if it's a VIP guy, they know I'm wholesaling it. They know what my wholesale fee is, and either they'll accept it or they won't.
Usually it's a good enough deal that they want it anyhow.
Most of the time. Correct.
Right.
And I also say, listen, I'm not greedy. At the same time, I always say, look, I'd rather do 20 years worth of deals like this together versus trying to screw you over on a deal. Like, if you really can't make the deal pencil at the number that I'm wholesaling it to you, we'll make it work. But also, you're not screwing me because I know how good of a deal this is, right? So it's like, if you don't want it at X, I have 2 other offers at the same price. What would you like to do?
Right.
And then they end up closing.
Right. Okay. Oh, as far as when you're calling, are you calling as an investor or are you calling as a broker? Like, what's your...
I personally call as an investor. My agents call as agents. And then when I make an offer, they put me as their buyer and them as the agent. It depends on who's calling. I would probably tell your agents to call as agents and you can call as an investor. When you are calling as an investor and then trying to flip back to being a broker, I'm not saying it's impossible, right? I've done it a lot, but it definitely is a little bit more finessing than it is just being as a broker.
You find that people are quicker to talk to you when you're not a broker, meaning the buyer, right? Okay.
Yeah, a lot more often.
Okay.
Which is why I talk like that, and right, and also I am an investor and I'm looking to buy more, so it's not untruthful. The goal here is to have as much lucrative conversations as possible. It doesn't just because I'm calling you as an investor and I do want to buy every single property I speak to. That is my intention. Doesn't mean I can because I want too much money.
So does it ever come across where you get someone who wants to sell? It's not a deal you want to buy. So then you say, oh well, I'm also a broker. Like, how do you...
Yeah, no, so what I'll do, so this happens a lot because not every single deal makes sense for me to buy anyways.
Right.
So it happens a lot. And I just say, listen, I am a licensed broker and my partner just wants to buy it off me. It does not make sense for me personally, but he's got some extra cash lying around and just wants to do the deal. Okay. How much did you want to net again? Oh, you want to net $3 million? Okay, great. He'll pay $3.2 million. He'll cover my fee and we'll have a nice day.
Oh, okay, got it. All right.
Because, in residential, you can't talk about net listings. You want to net however much money. Commercial, that's all it is.
Right.
Just a bunch of net listings.
Okay, got it. How often do you get people to sign some sort of honor agreement or anything? Not really to a You're just trying to put the deals together real quick.
Yeah, so I personally don't do it a lot. I do it, enough where like if I feel like I'm working with somebody I don't trust, I will always have something signed. If I'm blasting an email out with a deal, then I have it signed. Right, if I, I'll always protect myself when I need to protect myself, but it is not the first thing I'm trying to do with a deal. The lead I just told you about, we got the lead today. I made her an offer this morning. Okay, I made her an offer already of $4 million. She already got back to us. Countered at $8 million. We made her an offer today still at the $5 million and the $6 million with seller financing. And I already have it pitched out to our VIP list. We have a VIP list of a couple dozen people who are all like our very tight investors we do a lot of business with. We don't need to have that deal locked up. I don't need to have an exclusive. Right. I'm not worried about it yet. But the second that goes to an email blast, I'm not going to do that until I have an exclusive.
Right. That makes sense. Okay. Do you sign typical agreements, or you have your own agreement that you like gonna know?
Yeah, no, just a typical exclusive, a commission agreement. If you're saying like, hey, if I net you X amount of money, then you're going to pay me 6% commission. Call it a day.
Right. I wasn't on your underwriting class. I had a coaching call at that time, but I guess I'll catch the next one. Could we go over that sheet?
Sure, let's go over it, of course. Yeah. I told everyone basically what I did is I gave them very limited information. I just said to them, it's one tenant, the building's 16,000 square feet. They're doing a lease back, and they're paying $16,500 a month, triple net.
Okay.
That's the only information I gave them. And I said, how much would you pay? How much is this worth? How much would you pay? So I'm going to walk you through basically the same exact thing that I'm going to talk about on Thursday morning or, during the training. Okay. On this deal, because it is triple net, there is some expenses here. So I'm just going to basically take taxes on this deal. I think are like $32,000. Insurance is going to be like $12,000. There's going to be a bunch of other stuff. And we'll do 5% for management. So they're going to pay these expenses. There's obviously going to be way more expenses, but it's triple net. There's also a repair budget, which I'm going to hold in escrow, which I'm going to charge them for. Probably something like $1,000 minimum a month, maybe $1,500 a month. So I'll put 12 grand. Anyways, long story short, I'm going to then go back to income and I'm going to add this back. So like my point is that I want to make sure that I go to in expenses other than management. Mm-hmm. So my management cost is about 10 grand a year. But they're going to cover everything else. Let's go to, I am just going to do end of quarter 20 cap rate. I'm going to resell it. This is basically my future sale assumptions. When in the future, what am I going to sell this for? So I'm just going to add in a bunch of terms here. We're going to make some adjustments in a second. Interest rate on this deal, if we bought a property right now, we're probably going to be paying something close to like 7% interest. We're probably going to get 75% seller. We're going to do 0 here. We're probably going to get 75% loan to value. 25-year term because it's commercial. I'm just going to put a placeholder
commercial
here.
Has shorter, like 10 years.
Yeah. So it's a 25-year term amortization, but I'm probably only going to get a 5-year loan.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Let's see here. So I'm actually, this is my number. This is actually what I'm in contract for right now. Let's say I pay 15 grand there, syndication fee. Let's say I take $25,000 from my investors. If I raise any money, purchase and closing costs, I'm probably going to have to, let's see, closing costs are probably going to be 50 grand. Wonderful. So that's all figured out. Now let's go over here to income. I'm also going to make sure that this goes on for a while. Okay, great. So 16,500. We're going to add back all the expenses from here. 66,000 in expenses. I'm going to add back, let's just add back 5 grand a month because this is 5,500 a month is what the expenses are. I'm going to add back, let's say just about 5 grand, maybe a little bit less because of the management cost, which is about 10 grand a year. Let's do 54,000, just to make sure I'm doing this correctly, is 4,500 a month. I'm going to add that back. So I'm going to do 4,500 plus the 16. So that means they're going to be paying around 21,000 a month, okay? Which is they're paying all the expenses, right? Plus the base rent of 16,500. And they're going to get 3% increases a year. I also...
Where do you put the 3%?
Right up here.
Oh, okay, got it.
Okay, 3% increases a year. And then down here, I could put, this is where the vacancy rate goes. So vacancy rate. Anyways, vacancy rate would go right here. So typically you do like 3, but in this instance, because it's triple net, it's going to be 0. And it's one tenant. They take 100% of it. They signed a 5-year lease with a 5-year option. There's nothing I need to do here. Okay. So now I can go back over here and go back to our summary page. Long story short, I'm buying at an 8.5 plus cap rate. It's higher than this. It's actually a 9.1 as per the net operating income around 190. Okay. Anyways, so we're at around a 9.1 cap and I'm paying $2,075,000. Out of pocket, I'm going to put down about $625K roughly is what I estimated. My price per square foot's very, very, very healthy, right? In this market, the price per square foot's about 180 a foot. I'm paying 130. So, if we're just looking at like the type of sale I'm getting, right? Like I'm paying 130 divided into 180. I'm paying 72% of market value, so I'm getting a 20% off of market value. When you're plugging in numbers in this type of spreadsheet, it's important to look at this part here. So I'm assuming I'm going to sell this in 20 quarters, which, because everything's done in quarterly basis, like I do my distributions to my investors quarterly, everything else. So in this instance, I'm holding this for 5 years. However, if I only held this for, let's just say, I don't know, 2 years, my value doesn't go drastically down, right? Like, so if I go to 20 again, it's an extra 300 grand. I'm not saying it's nothing, but the point is I'm still in the high twos, low threes. If I go to 8, so the point is I can sell it much faster and I can get a very similar return. And because I'm making my money faster, my rate of return goes up. So even if I'm collecting the same money, like if I make it's like if you made $1 million in 1 week versus making $1 million in 10 years from the same investment, it's technically a much higher rate of return, right? Same amount of money collected, but your rate of return is drastically different because a lot of it's about speed. How fast can you churn the money? So in this instance, if I sell it in 8 quarters, I'm churning the money much faster. So you're gonna look at something called XIRR, or you can ignore the X. I don't even know why we put that here, but internal rate of return. Okay, so this internal rate of return is basically how fast are we churning money. The S&P 500 churns at 8 to 9% a year, right? 8 to 10% a year. I'm churning this money at 38% a year. Much better, right? So that everyone goes like, oh, why would you, like when you have a really bad investment deal and they're like, why would I do this deal? Because you have to make the return so lucrative that I want to take my money out of the market and move it into this. Obviously, if you see a rate of return here of, let's just say, this is not going to be actually accurate, but if in this instance, I'm not saying this is going to sell for a 12 cap, but you start seeing numbers where like, oh, my future value in this market is only 1.9 and I'm paying $2,075,000. I'm actually losing money, right? This is what properties are listed on LoopNet, by the way. Like the properties are like, oh, the seller wants $2 million. It's like this is a great deal. Like no. It's gonna be worth $2 million in 5 years. So I can't pay $2 million a day. It makes no sense, right? So, anyways, let's just drop this back down. Long story short.
Figure again this calculator here. How do you know what it could be worth in 5 years? How does anybody know really?
So again, these are the sales assumptions, right? Like, so I'm saying like, okay, if interest rates did not change, they still stay the same in 5 years, what kind of cap rate could this property sell for? All day long and twice on Tuesday, right? So I would say maybe a 7.5 to be conservative. I could sell this deal for a 7.5% cap rate, no problem. So it's like if I had a fire sale this deal, I could probably sell it for a 7.5, even an 8% cap rate if I needed to. I could sell it for an 8% cap rate if I needed to fire sale this property. I needed my money. I need it out. I can sell it for an 8 cap tomorrow and I could sell it. I can play around with these figures, right? I'll probably put a 7.5 cap because I'm probably not going to be in that position. I can see here that at a 7.5% cap rate in 8 quarters, right? I'm making sale assumptions. Everything about investing, it's like high level assumptions, right? Based on these assumptions, this is what we should do, right? Return wise. Our goal is that we're going to hold this asset for something like 2 to 3 years or less, depending on when interest rates drop drastically. Like if all of a sudden rates drop to 5%, I can sell this thing for 6.5% cap rate, and all of a sudden I can sell it for $3 million. It'll be ridiculous. I'm going to take that offer and run for the hills. But if interest rates stay high, I'll just keep on cruising with this property, and maybe in 5 years I'll sell, or in 2, 3, 4, 5 years I'll sell it for a 7.5% cap rate. Somewhere in the mid to high twos. Again, I'm going to be in contract at $2,075,000. Maybe I can get it for a little bit less during like a retrade. I'll be like trying to nickel and dime them during a retrade. But long story short, again, my rates of return are pretty damn healthy. I have a very high cap rate. Really quickly in your head. Do you know what a cap rate is, by the way? So think about it like this. Really fast math in your head is like, okay, my cap rate, in correlation to today's interest rates. How much of a delta is there?
Right. So basically because the interest rates are high, the banks will only lend at like a cap rate of 7 or higher, or at like? Well,
I wouldn't say a cap rate is 7 or higher, but this number has to be 1.3. The debt coverage ratio needs to be at 1.3. Okay. So that means my cap rates have to be higher in order to service high levels of debt. Like getting 75% LTV is a lot in commercial right now, because most of the time the properties are not being sold at these types of cap rates. Like most of the time people are putting down 40%, which what happens is that when you put down 40%, it kills my rates of return because I have to come out of pocket substantially more money. So because I can put down only 25% plus some closing costs, I'm able to save a lot of money on this deal where overall my rate of return will be much higher because I'm not out of pocket so much. So ideally it's like, okay, so when you're talking to somebody on the phone and they're like, oh yeah, I want, in this instance on this deal, say, let's just say they go, yeah, I want $2.5 million. You're like, okay, $2.5 million. How much did you say the rent was real quick? And they say, oh, well, I'm paying $16,500 triple net. Well then, you run some quick numbers. I'm just going to do a sale assumption. Give me a minute. So let's just say you're talking to somebody on the phone and they go like, look, I want $2.5 million. Okay, I'm just going to write this down on my paper here. $2.5 million. I bring in, let's just say $200,000 a year, triple net. You're doing in your head, you're like, okay, $2.5 million, $200,000 triple net. Like, okay, so then I'm going to do $200,000 divided into $2.5 million. I'll do this on the phone while I'm talking. I'm like, oh, okay, that's an 8% cap rate. Okay, great. That's not too bad. But also, let's just give you another example. They say they want the same $2.5 million, but they're like, okay, I'm only paying, the tenant's only paying $10,000 a month triple net. They're like, okay, 10,000 times 12 is 120. 120, we'll do the same math, right? 120,000 divided into $2.5 million is only a 4.8% cap rate. So immediately, I'm having a conversation live with the person, right? You and I can be talking to them live and be like, this guy only wants a 4.8% cap rate. This doesn't make any sense. Right? This guy's this person's off their rocker. When I'm having this type of conversation, this is when I would gut check somebody and be like, listen, a bank's going to give me a loan for $400,000 on this deal. It's $700,000 or $800,000 on this deal. How on planet Earth can anybody pay you $2.5 million? I mean, like, I'd barely be able to offer you $1 million, maybe $1 million too. And then I gut check them, and then they're like, okay, well, listen, like, if you can get me an offer for $2 million, that's it. Like, and then, but the point is, I'm trying to gauge them in that conversation. So when the cap rate and interest rates are so out of alignment, I can know very quickly how likely we are to transact. But if they tell me like, oh, based on the numbers they tell me, like, oh, it's actually an 8% cap rate, in my head, I'm like, oh, there's going to be profit. I'm going to be making cash flow day one. While you can have quick conversation, and we'll teach you as that process goes on. And the cool thing, again, you're in my market, so anything you come across, keep me posted, because I'll be able to, help you sell it very quickly. Plus, I'm always looking myself. Any other questions about the underwriting part?
I guess, I'll learn more as we go. I have one, like a sheet like that just for like small residential stuff, but
yeah,
for the bigger deals, it's a lot more complex, but I think I'll just,
yeah, look, you're just going to have to play with the numbers 100,000 times,
yeah.
like I do, right? Like you get more and more used to it, more and more you look at it. And again, like you get better and better at back in the napkin math. Like it's what I'll try to do. Like, let's just say it's like, if you have two deals, right? One's $200,000 triple net and one's $200,000 gross. It's a very different value. They're identical buildings. Both are 10,000 square foot retail buildings, right? $200,000 triple net, $200,000 gross. Right? They can be right freaking next to each other. And they're two completely different values. Right. So it's like, when you're doing back in the napkin math, you take, you're taking massive levels of assumptions of like, okay, what are my rough expenses going to be, roughly? And then with triple net, there is no expenses. They're paying 100, you're going to get reimbursed for 100% of your cost, minus your management and vacancy rates, right? So right. It's paying attention to these nuances over and over and over and over and over again. So when a new deal comes along, you can tell with, a quick run over the numbers of where the value is going to be. Because my intention is for you to be able to go to an investor and say, hey, I got this deal at XYZ, address at XYZ price. Here's the details, the financials, and know that buyer is probably going to transact versus wondering what they're even going to say to you. When you know it's a great deal, you're never going to be wondering what's going to happen.